The Lord be with you. A reading from the Gospel of Mary. So this is a Gospel which was found in about 1895 in Egypt, attributed to Mary of Magdala, and it's written in Coptic originally. Unfortunately, there are 4 pages missing in the manuscript. So at the end of today's reading, just trails off because obviously it's part of the 4 pages. Peter said to Mary, "Sister, we know that the Savior loved you more than any other woman. Tell us the words of the Savior that you know, but which we haven't heard." Mary responded, "I will report to you as much as I remember that you don't know." And she began to speak these words to them. She said, "I saw the Lord in a vision, and I said to him, 'Lord, I saw you today in a vision.' He said to me, 'Congratulations to you for not wavering at seeing me. For where the mind is, there also is the treasure.' I said to him, 'Lord, how does a person who sees a vision see it? With the soul or with the spirit?' The Savior answered, 'The visionary does not see with the soul or with the spirit, but with the mind, which exists between these two. This is what sees the vision, and that is what..." Homer, dude. A word inspired by God. In the summer of 1955, my family and I lived in a tiny little hamlet called Temple Michael, about 6 miles outside Cork City. And by hamlet, I literally mean a hamlet. Literally, there was a pub called Brown's Pub. There was a 4-arch bridge going over the river. There was a shovel mills. And then there was our little house. And that was it. That was Temple Michael. So the shovel mills was a place, a foundry where they built agricultural implements like shovels and forks and spades and stuff like that. And my grandfather worked in it. But my mother and my father both worked in Cork City. And they went to work every morning on an old 250cc BSA motorbike. And my mother worked in a laundry. She was a laundry superintendent in a big hospital in the city. And my father worked in the post office as a clerk in the post office. And my grandparents lived with us. My grandmother, whom I called Nana, and my grandfather called Daddy Jim, and he worked in the foundry. And at that stage, there were 5 of us kids. In the summer of 55, I was 9 years old, and my brother Seamus was 7, and Deirdre was 6, and Ethna was 4, and my little brother Porrick was 1 year old. He was still sucking on a bottle. And one day, we decided to play Indians. Now, even as a 7 or an 8 or 9 year old, I did not like to play cowboys and Indians, because I was really upset with the fact that Indians were always portrayed in the old movies as these dumb savages who just rode around in circles waiting for the cowboys to shoot them down. So I was always very upset that the Indians were portrayed. So I never played cowboys and Indians as a kid. I'd play Indians and Indians, but I wouldn't play cowboys and Indians. So this day, we decided we were going to play Indians and Indians. And myself and Ethna, we were very close, although she was only 4 and I was 9. We decided we were going to be Apaches. And Seamus and Deirdre, who were very close, decided they wanted to be Sioux. And Porrick just sat there sucking on his bottle. So we figured out to be Indians, we needed wigwams. Now, none of the sheets in our own little cots were obviously could make a wigwam. So we figured out that the sheets, the big double sheets from my parents' bed, that would do admirably. So we snuck into the house and took the 2 sheets off their bed. Now, there were lots of long poles available because it was a shovel foundry, so the handles of the spades, there was lots of those around. So we dug 2 holes, sunk these handles on the ground, they were about this height, and then tried to drape the sheets over them. But even the big sheets from my father's and mother's bed, they weren't long enough to quite make it to the ground. So it was very simple. We had a hole in the middle of it and stuck it down and pushed the pole up through it until the ends reached, and then we stuck wooden stakes in the 4 corners to keep it pinned down. And then we stole some lipstick from my mother, and I wrote the word Apache on our wigwam, A-P-A-C-H-E, and Seamus wrote the word Sioux on his, and Seamus was 6, and he wasn't very good at spelling, so I went in as S-U. And he and Deirdre hung out in one wigwam, and Ed and myself hung out in the other, and Porrick was outside sucking on his bottle. So we had made war. We went on the warpath, and we attacked each other with tomahawks and knives and bows and arrows. And this went on for about 2 or 3 hours. And then we figured it was time to make peace, and that we should have a meal together. So we snuck into the house, and we stole a frying pan, and a pound of sausages, and a pound of butter, and a box of matches, and we came out, and we made a fire, and put the pan in the fire, and threw all of the butter, a pound of butter into the pan until it melted, and then threw 16 sausages on top of it, and fried them until they were brown and crisp all over, and then we ate them. And we gave Pádraig a few sausages as well, while he was still sucking on his butter. And then we figured that the pièce de résistance was we'd have to smoke the pipe of peace as the final gesture of, coming to grips with each other. So my grandfather had a whole array of pipes, all kinds of pipes, straight pipes and bent pipes, Sherlock Holmes kinds of pipes. So we went in and we stole one of his pipes. And both of my parents, literally at that stage, they both smoked 3 packs of cigarettes each day. They were called Sweet Afton. I don't know if they ever made it in this country. So there was always butts all over the place. So we picked up a whole bunch of butts, took the paper off them, stuffed them into the pipe, and then we lit it up and we started smoking. And so we were coughing like crazy. And then we gave it to Pádraig. And Pádraig was a much better sucker than the rest of us because he was on the bottle. So he took 3 or 4 good mouthfuls, and then he barfed. Covered himself in sausages and milk and whatever was inside them. So we're figuring out how we're going to clean him up. There was nothing to clean him up with, so we got a few fistfuls of grass and wiped it off his face and his jersey. And so now he looks like something from Borneo with grass around his face. And at this stage, he starts crying, so we decide to rush him in home to my grandmother. And she takes one look at this child. He's covered in barf. There's grass all over his face, and he's crying his eyes out, and she snatches him to go to clean him up. And when she's cleaning him up, we figure out this is a good time to sneak the sheets back into my parents' bed. They were never going to notice. So we sneak it back into the bed and we dress the bed. And of course they didn't. Until 10 o'clock that night, they both came home from town on the motorbike. We're fast asleep, the kids are fast asleep. About 10 o'clock, I hear this horrendous, "Oh my God!" Now my father wasn't the most even-tempered of people. He got into bed, started stretching his feet down, got his big toe caught right in the hole in the middle, and just reefed the sheet from nape to chaps. And we didn't have electricity, so we had to light a candle, jump out of bed, and figure out what was wrong. And then he discovered there was 5 sheets in each. There were 5 holes in each sheet. They were covered in grass and barf, and they smelled of wood smoke. Now, for some very strange reason, I can't remember the end of that story. I'm sure if I visited a psychiatrist for a number of sessions and he did a regression hypnotherapy on me, it's the reason for me being as pathological as I am. I'm sure I got the crap beaten out of me. Yeah? So I want to talk about that today. I'm going to make 3 main points this morning. I'm going to talk about the planet as our home. I'm going to talk about moral models of morality, and then I'm going to talk about ethics for the 21st century. Is that a private joke?
Not in the next Sunday. That's why you can't remember.
Okay. Never. Okay. So we start with the first one. The planet as our home. What I got on that occasion, very soon after at least, was that a home is not just a place that you steal sausages and butter and lipstick and bed sheets from. It's a place to which you have to contribute. Homes are not just places that provide for all our needs. They don't just give us shelter and food and clothes and school fees. They're places that we have a responsibility for as well. And so we learned as little kids, every one of us had our chores to do. I never got pocket money my entire life, even up to the time I finished high school. We never got pocket money, we couldn't afford it. And so you contributed, we went out and we worked in our spare time. I worked as a petrol pump attendant from age 13 on. And that money went straight into the coffers of the family because you had to contribute and do chores around the house. So we were taught that when you're part of a household, you're not just there to take from the house. You're not just there to be given stuff by your parents. This isn't just a place you sleep in, or a place you're fed in, or a place that gives you clothes. It's a place that you have to contribute to according to your ability as well. And that's what I see with our planet. I see that there are perhaps 3 different ways in which we have attempted to live on this planet. The first one is that we've lived on this planet as freeloaders. Is that a real word in American English? It is. Freeloaders, okay. We've attempted to live as freeloaders. That this is a home that owes us, to which we have no responsibilities whatsoever. We can take what we want, when we want, from where we want it, and we don't have to be grateful, we don't have to do respect, we don't have to cooperate, we can take what we want. And humanity has tended to live in that modality. on our home planet Earth. We've tended to live totally as freeloaders, and we see the world in the state it is precisely because we've lived without any sense of obligation, our responsibility, our love, our gratitude to our mother, Gaia. So that's the first way in which we lived. There's a second way, perhaps a little bit more enlightened, and it's like, imagine you're a grown child, but you're still living at home because you're trying to save up money. You're going to get married in a year's time. So you're trying to save some bucks, but you're living at home and you're still eating your parents' food and you're still sheltering under their home, but you have respect for it. But you realize this is not your full-time home. This is only a temporary place, and you're going to be moving on and you're going to have a family of your own at some stage. Now, this is what religion has tended to do in a sense. In a sense, it's told us, you know, guys, this is a veil of tears. This is not your real home. Your real home is heaven. It's the afterlife. And so, in a sense, you can do pretty much what you need here. Take what you want from here because this really isn't your home. You can respect it, but really, it's not a permanent residence. You're only here until you get married. And so that's the sense even religious people have had, that we've treated the planet as a home we live in as adult children who are going to move on and get married eventually. And so we don't need to contribute that much. A little bit perhaps, just to show we're grateful, but not a whole lot. And there's a third way of living on planet Earth, and that's the way that it feels to me we need to begin thinking about very, very soon. And it is the model of an extended multi-generational family, which I grew up with in Ireland and I saw in Africa. It's a system whereby on the compound there are aunts and uncles and grandparents and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and grandnieces and grandnephews, hundreds of people, but they're a multi-generational extended family all living together. And they live with total cooperation and total dependence and total gratitude toward each other because they know this is their home in perpetuity. There will be kids born here and the elders will die here and the baton will be passed, but there will always be this cooperation among all of us. So this is the third way of living on planet Earth. It's the realization that really we live as an extended family. And by extended family, I don't mean that we live as Irish people and Italians and Hindus and Buddhists. I don't mean that. I mean we live with our 10 million other species on the planet. This is our extended family. We live in such a way that we realize there is only one home. And it's not just home to the human species, it's home to 10 million other species who are our sisters and our brothers. And we have to live cooperatively. Everybody needs to get their needs met. Everybody needs to be respected. Every single one of us needs to be respected. So that's my first point. Living as a multi-generational, extended family on planet Earth with respect and cooperation for all of our sisters and all of our brothers. Second point I want to make then is, I'm going to just talk about some models of morality, which will bring me to my final conclusion point. Any of you who have ever studied even Psych 1 know about a character called Lawrence Kohlberg, who was a professor of psychology at Harvard, who developed a model of moral evolution, which basically suggests that we evolve morally through three basic stages if we finally manage to get to the third space. And I'm going to extrapolate and use slightly different language from what he did. But basically what he did was, he proposed vignettes to people in order to find out how they made their moral decisions. He wasn't so much interested in the decisions they made or the conclusions they came to. He was much more interested in how they came to the conclusions to which they came. So he wanted to know what their reasoning process was in making moral choices. But what he concluded was, and I'm going to use slightly different language from him, was that there were three basic stages through which people went. The first one was ego-centered decision-making, moral decision. The second was ethnocentric, and the third one was ecocentric. So let me explain those three pieces. Egocentric moral thinking is about deciding what to do on the basis of what's good for me and what's bad for me. So I'm going to do what feels good to me, and I'm going to avoid stuff that might get me punished. And so this is typically the moral thinking of a little child. They figure out very quickly what tastes good, the cookies, and what feels bad, getting spanked. And so my behavior is predicated upon doing what gets me rewarded and avoiding what gets me punished. So it's a very egocentric model. But around age 7 or 8 or so, when a child begins to develop a real moral capacity, they're inducted into the tribe. They're now told what the rules of the tribe are and what their role in the tribe is. And now they begin thinking ethnocentrically or tribally. So now their decisions are predicated upon what's good for the tribe, and what's bad for the tribe. And you do what's good for the tribe, and you avoid doing what's bad for the tribe. Now, unfortunately, the vast bulk of us, that's as far as we get in our moral evolution. Very few people seem to make it to stage 3. And using my language, you want to say that stage 3 for me is eco-centric moral thinking. It is about making moral decisions based on what is good for the planet and what is not good for the planet. Not just the tribe, whether the tribe is a religious denomination or it's a national group, whatever it is. Making my decisions on the basis of what is good for my mother, planet Earth, and what is not good for my mother, planet Earth. And this is eco-centric moral thinking. And unfortunately, very few people seem to have arrived at that place, and so we're trashing our environment as a result. So that's one model, the model of Lawrence Kohlberg. There's another model which is kind of a gender-based kind of thinking, which kind of splits between male moral choices and female moral choices. And it goes a little bit like this. Typically, and this is stereotypically, obviously, this is not all men think like this, all women think like that. But stereotypically, male moral choices are the application of willpower to rules. So there's a rule, and you apply willpower, and that's moral behavior. So the law says you can't drive more than 30 miles an hour in a particular zone. There, you apply willpower. You want to go at 50, but you're going to go at 30 because the law says it. So there's a law, you apply willpower, and that's kind of male moral thinking. Female moral thinking tends to be a little bit different. It tends to widen the context significantly. So moral choices very typically from women is that they will look at a much bigger context, not just this is the rule, you apply willpower and then you're moral. It's what is really the good for the greater number of people. So on any moral issue, it's not just what's the rule here, let me apply my willpower and then that's the decision. It's what is the good for my family here? And so how do I relate to rules and laws in respect to what's good for the group? There are times when I need to disregard them completely. So female moral thinking tends to be much more contextualized than stereotypical male kind of thinking, where the male is much more inclined to find out what the rules are and then apply willpower to it. The female is much more inclined to think in a bigger context and feel into what is the good for the greater number of people. So that's a second kind of a model. A third kind of model would be religious thinking. So, for instance, within Hinduism, there's the notion of the karmic yogi. There are 4 different kinds of yogis in Hinduism. There's the yoga of Jnana Yoga, which is the yoga of the mind. There's Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of the heart. There's Raja Yoga, which is the yoga of meditation. And then there's Karmic Yoga, which is the yoga of right action. And to illustrate this, they tell a story about a karmic yogi who's sitting on the banks of the Ganges with a group of his disciples. And there's a shrub growing out over the river. And a scorpion climbs onto the shrub and falls into the river and has been swept downstream. And the yogi fishes him out. And the scorpion stings him. And the yogi just releases him. About half an hour later, the same scorpion crawls out of the same bush, falls in, is being swept downstream, and is drowning again. And the yogi fishes him out, and the scorpion stings him again. And this is repeated 3 times. And finally, one of the disciples says, "Master, get a clue. He keeps stinging you." And the yogi says, "Of course. That's what scorpions do. It's the nature of a scorpion to sting. And it's the nature of a yogi to help beings who are in distress. I'm not rescuing because I think he's going to be grateful. I'm not rescuing because I think people are going to kind of think well of me. I'm doing it because that is my nature. It's the nature of a karmic yogi to act in a particular fashion, to act in compassion and love for all creatures, irrespective of outcome." So within Hinduism, you have this notion that the moral code is about right action, doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And my favorite exemplar of this is Mother Teresa. I think of this extraordinary woman who went out day after day after day for 50 years perhaps onto the streets of Calcutta, found a dirty, stinky, dying little baby, picked it up, brought it home, washed it, cleaned it, loved it and fed it, and it died. And she went out the next day and she picked up another dirty, diseased, dying little creature. She picked that up, brought it home, washed it, fed it, loved it, and it died anyway. And she did that day after day after day for 50 years. I don't think she had the intention that she was going to wipe out world poverty in her lifetime. The fact was, there was a little dying baby on the street in front of her, and she picked it up because that was her nature to do it. So that's the karmic yogi. So that's a different kind of moral code. You do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. irrespective of outcome, whether people appreciate it, punish you for it, or think you're ridiculous for doing it. There's a similar precept in Buddhism. They call it right living or right livelihood, the very same notion, that you have to choose what you do in life so as to have a minimal negative impact on the world and a maximum positive impact on the world. You get it within Christianity. There's a beautiful passage in one of John's letters where he says, little children, love and then do what you will. Because if you're really acting in love, whatever you do will be moral. And I've pointed out this distinction to you before, the distinction in Catholic theology between free will and freedom. Free will is the ability to do as I choose. Freedom is the ability to do as God chooses. So the only truly free person is the person who chooses the good. To the extent that I do not choose the good, I'm addicted to something. I'm not free. I'm exercising free will, but I don't have freedom. Freedom is the ability to choose the good. So there was a kind of a Christian articulation of the same. You can look at all the great wisdom traditions of the world, and you find in every single one of them embedded is the golden rule. Do to other people as you would have them do unto you. So in a sense, this is the core of all moral thinking. Which brings me to my third point. I call it an ethics for the 21st century. And I want to define for myself what I mean by ethics. I haven't come across a definition of ethics that really resonates with me. So this morning in my meditation, I got one. And it's this, that for me, ethics is living in radical harmony with all sentient beings. It is the science of living in radical harmony with all sentient beings. That's what ethics is. Ethics is not just business agreements between human communities. Ethics is literally a science in which I live in radical harmony with all sentient beings. Now, as I look at our trajectory on planet Earth, and I look at our ethical behavior over the eons, we have been definitely moving and definitely evolving and definitely growing. And so I see, for instance, that the notion of personhood, conferring personhood or rights on individuals, is something that has had a very interesting evolutionary history. Initially, if you go back far enough, the only persons with rights were male kings. They had absolute rights over everything else. Nobody else had rights except the male ruler. At some stage in our evolutionary trajectory, this right was extended to free men, and I emphasize the men part of that. Free men were now accorded the status of being persons, having rights in their own right. At some stage down the road, slaves were accorded personhood, or the right to have rights. At some stage, much, much later in the game, women were accorded personhood and given rights. A little bit later still, little children were recognized as being persons in their own right and having rights. Eventually, even the unborn child was recognized as having rights and being a person in some sense. In our own times, we recognize the personhood and the rights of animals and realize we can't just do what we want with animals. They have rights also in some way. And my belief is, and my hope is, that this trajectory is taking us inevitably towards the realization that the planet herself is a mega person with rights, and that when we get to that place, we will live very, very differently on our planet. So it's a movement, it seems to me, from minimalistic kind of moral thinking to the kind of phrase maximalistic moral thinking. It is a movement from moral systems as a kind of doing what we need to do to avoid the worst excesses of human greed, which is kind of a minimalist approach to moral thinking, to the understanding that it is an alignment. It is the transformation that happens when we understand the science of being in radical harmony with all sentient beings, then we're maximizing the models of morality. So it's a movement from individual human to mega-human to meta-human. A movement from just individual rights of individual human people to mega-humans, which is thinking of ourselves as members of an entire species, thinking of ourselves not as individuals, but as a species of human beings. So I would call that a mega-human moral system. Finally, to a meta-human moral system, which is that we operate not just as members of a species, but that we operate as members of a global family, all sentient beings on our planet. That we think of ourselves not as individual human beings, not even just as a human family, vis-a-vis nature, but as a member of the group of all sentient beings, and that we operate and think as a species from that model. And this is a system of morality which is not based on learning rules or laws. It's a system of morality based on resonating at the deepest core of ourselves, that the God within us finally awakens to the God within others, and that we create a symphony and a harmony on planet Earth, God singing lullabies to herself. That's what it would look like. And religion has an important part to play in this. Religion must help us to move from the sectarianism of denominationalism to beginning thinking of a global spirituality, where as an entire species we think of what our response is to all other species. It is moving from merely cultural faith in individual gurus or individual revelations or individual scriptures to begin thinking totally of our faith in the ineffable source which binds us together. So that is the movement that I see. I foresee that a major component of this new moral outlook will be sustainability. But not sustainability in the sense that we're trying to live more frugally as individual human beings so we can live longer as human beings or live longer as a species. That is not sustainability. That's still selfishness. It's a different kind of sustainability. It's the sustainability of living more frugally so that all species can live. Not just living more frugally so we get to survive a bit longer as individuals or as a species itself. And so I want to propose something I proposed here once before. I foresee at some stage in the very not distant future a world conference which will last perhaps 2 or 3 years, to which all species will be invited. It will be a conference in which the beings of planet Earth will make a decision about how life on planet Earth can be optimized so that all beings can get their needs met. And I see human beings having one voice in that process among 10 million voices. That there will be shamans from various indigenous cultures who will represent the other species, dressed like them, act their part, and speak on their behalf, and represent their needs, and represent their viewpoints. And that finally, as all of God's manifestation on planet Earth, we will come together as a truly global community and create a system of life in which all of our brothers and sisters can come to the banquet table of God's largesse.